Hey there, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. Excited to see so many of you here. So I'll be saying good morning, I'll be saying good afternoon and good evening to a few of you. Yeah, it's so fun to see that so many of you from all different parts of the world are here. So welcome. We've got a lot of great stuff in front of us, and I'm going to be introducing myself in just a few minutes. But the key topic is going to be around understanding golf swing biomechanics and how we can incorporate mobility to enhance our players. If we look at it and just kind of some basic foundational pieces, feel free to ask questions, as many as you like. You can use the chat, you can use the question piece. I might stop and answer them right away, or I might just kind of hold off on them and then wait to the end of the presentation as well. If you have the chance, feel free to use the chat right now. Just give me a thumbs up to make sure that you guys can see me and hear me, or just give me a hi or whatever suits you. So just to make sure that you guys can see and hear me. So it is a webinar. I can't see and hear you. So make sure that if you have any questions, use the chat and I'll be happy to answer them as well as I possibly can. My name's Chris Mansson. I've spent the past 10-15 years within golf fitness, within strength and conditioning, helping golfers of all types of levels, all types of ages, and all different types of handicaps. And I've had the privilege to work with very many teaching professionals. I've spent a lot of time in the US studying something called applied functional science. And over the past years, I've spent a number of years creating and developing the platform called Kinexit. Now, we've helped hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of professionals all around the world. And what we are seeing nowadays is that a lot more professionals are moving towards this holistic approach where we're incorporating technique, we're incorporating the equipment side of things, we're also incorporating fitness. So all parts of this game creates this holistic approach. We know how important the game is, and we know how important our body is when we connect it to the swing. But are we all kind of incorporating it in the best possible way in this sense? Now, we know that fitness has two sides to it. You have one side, which, they love going to the gym. You love lifting heavy weights. You love to sweat. You like to work out and so forth. But there's also another side of this where we have the perspective of players that just feel a little bit too intimidated when it comes to going to the gym. It's a little bit scary, too much heavy weights, too much feeling like I don't really fit in here. We know that we've got a massive industry with golf players, all types of ages, that are more looking to, play golf, enjoy the game of golf. But you get to a point where your game is limited of the way you move. We need to be somewhat physical. We need to be able to rotate. We need to be able to bend forwards and side bend. We need to go down, pick the ball out of the hole and so forth. So there's some aspects to golf and fitness that really, really will work together. What we've seen that, just from a Kinexit perspective, with as little as 50 minutes 3 times per week, we can have some massive impact on golfers. We've seen everything from improved distance because we're increasing range of motion. We can see increased revenue for the pro because we're adding more tools to their toolbox. And we can see extended membership careers because the more we can help players move and improve their flexibility and mobility, the more we can see them play for a number of years. Naturally, we will lose members, but we don't want to lose members due to injury. It's always a sad thing to see. I think all of us can be quite clear that the body is important. We look at the tour players today on the female and male side, you can just see that there is a higher level of athleticism. So, needless to say, it's important. But do we all implement fitness routines and so forth into our teaching? Well, the answer is no. We definitely see that over the years, everyone pretty much that we talk to feels that the body is important, no doubt. But, sometimes we've historically seen fitness as something I'm not very confident in, so I kind of leave it to someone else. Or I might feel that I'm a little bit unsure how to package golf fitness, don't really know how to put it together so I can have a clear ROI on what I'm doing. or historically it's maybe taken too long. In all honestly, sometimes we've got these long 45, 50-minute screens. They're great. They're awesome. We're locating all types of limitations. But when it takes too long, we know that, we'll kind of lose the player's interest. So we need to be clear here. We got to make sure that it's easy. It doesn't take too long. It's something that pretty much anyone can do. And the last piece is we don't want it to be too complicated because, let's be honest here as well. Sometimes we overcomplicate things and, we need to make sure that it's easy for the player to digest. It's something that any pro can do. And what we're doing is we're trying to get players to move a little bit better, get a little bit more stable, and increase their strength a little bit. Now, what we do from Kinexit is we help teaching professionals, academies, clubs, indoor facilities, pretty much anyone who runs a golf fitness or any type of golf business, we want to help. We basically are like a launch monitor, but for golf fitness. We provide a tool where we can improve the physical abilities for students. We look at this as a way where you can analyze, where you can share personally designed programs, and you can all do all this from your dashboard. And it's a really, really efficient way for those pros that want to create a more holistic approach. Now, we have clients and golf professionals, and we've got businesses and so forth that we help all around the world. We've got great kind of partnerships all around the world as well. So really proud of that. And right now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be diving in to a number of different things. So one thing that I want to cover is, first of all, why should I as a golf pro be incorporating golf fitness into my teaching? What's the kind of benefits to it? We want to understand a little bit more around the golf swing biomechanics. Now, we only have about, a 60-minute session here. So we're going to go as deep as we possibly can. If you're interested to learn more, feel free to reach out. We have individual sessions that we have with pros and so forth. If you want to learn more about Kinexit, or if you want to join us for our upcoming webinars, please do so. We're going to talk about how we can incorporate mobility programs, kind of break down some of the key biomechanics to the golf swing and how that can incorporate then into the fitness world as well. So I hope that sounds okay. I reckon let's kind of dive in. So why should I, as a golf pro, be adding golf fitness into my teaching toolbox? Well, first of all, like so many tour pros, pretty much everyone is adapting fitness regimens. Just looking at the latest kind of episodes that we've seen on Netflix and so forth, these guys are so incredibly professional, and where they're spending so much time is at the gym. It's a great role model for a lot of golfers today because we know that, they hit the ball incredibly well. They're on the range for hours and hours a day, but where they're actually making a lot of impact is in the gym and in their body. That's where they know that that's kind of the secret key to unlocking more out of their game. And it's really one of the big door openers to technical development. And what we need to do is we need to make sure it's easy. We need to make sure it's accessible and pretty much anyone can get to. And we don't want to have the hurdles being too high, like people have to spend hours and hours a week. We're talking like, what can we do for 15 minutes 3 times per week? Another piece to it is kind of why we want to be incorporating it. And I think one of the key things here, of course, apart from just overall player development, overall getting players to feel better and be more kind of healthy, key pieces like that, I'm going into pieces like improving swing and ball speed. This piece is something that people can relate to. Pretty much anyone, if you ask an audience like, hey, who wants to hit the ball shorter? Nobody does. Everyone wants to hit the ball further. And a way to do that is you can either equip them with better equipment. We can help them with their custom fitting and so forth. And probably all you guys are joining today are probably amazing at helping your players get fitted in the best possible way. We can look at improving their swing and their swing mechanics. And you guys are also probably really good at tweaking and making it easier for them to swing and so forth. But we all know that we've had the golfer in front of us that is so stiff or they're so restricted that they're not getting anything out of their game. They just can't rotate, for instance. Then we know that this is one of the hidden kind of gems. And we all know that the more swing length we can create, the better we can create acceleration in our swing. And it's what we see is just when we help players just get a little bit more mobile, we can see some phenomenal results. So this is one key thing where I would say that if a golfer wants to come in and improve their swing and ball speed, this is one area where we call golf fitness, where we can do a lot with. Another piece you could say is just creating good, solid habits. If I can tell that most of you will probably, when you're working with a student, you're asking questions in the start, you're asking them about their handicap and, how much do they play and what you can do for them, etc. I would say have a benchmark where you're asking them if they are warming up before play. If they're not, this is where you can help them just by getting in a couple of drills every time. So let's say a golfer plays a couple of times a week. There's a lot of free training here that we can incorporate. We're talking, maybe 3 or 4 drills that they can do just to get their body ready for play, make sure that they're prepared, but also see it as part of the training. So this is a great question I like to ask players. Do you have a golf fitness routine or do you have a warm-up routine? If they don't, make sure that you pan that to them so they know what they're doing. At Kinexit, we actually do have QR codes or warm-up signs that professionals can use on their driving range so people can scan, they can get a ton of different warm-up drills just so they're ready for play. So I would say this is a key component in creating healthy habits and a training culture amongst your players. Another piece is just that game development piece. And we talk about that door opener into, the whole room of how we can get players better. Because that's one of the big pieces here is we want our players to improve. And if you put it together well, if we have time, I'll show you a couple examples of some packaging options that we provide for the pros that we work with. But I would say it's really profitable and attractive when we're incorporating all parts of the game and not just saying, hey, buy 4 lesson, get the 5th one for free. Instead, when you're working with a player, we're saying, hey, when you're going to be working with me, we're going to be assessing all parts of your game. We're going to look at your swing. We're going to look at what's in your bag. We're going to look at your body. We're going to assess we might go out and play like 4 holes to get a good sense of how you play and live basically. So it's something that I think a lot more pros would benefit from by incorporating that component. And then finally, we're making a professional impression. And by just, we don't want to give everyone the same golf specs. It would be easy if we had, 10 sets of the same bag and 10 sets of, just the same setup. But we need to customize it, and we want to customize an experience. And there's not a better way than doing so by looking at their technique, what's in their bag, and then also then assessing their body. And there's easy ways to do this. So if we break down the mechanics, now that we know that golf fitness is an important piece, we want to understand that there's multiple ways to swing a golf club. There's thousands of ways. Now, we don't get involved when it comes to the technical side. I know that there's different schools, there's different opinions, but if we just remove the club for a second and just look at the way these players are loading their body, it's quite impressive. Either or, when it comes to golf, we need to be able to move in a multi-plane kind of a purpose. We need to be able to move in different planes, but in different sequences. And one of the key things here is when it comes to fitness is we want to make sure that doesn't matter what type of swing you have, we want to optimize the player's ability to move in these different planes. So if we break it down and look at it, we know that the body can move in 3 planes of motion. So I'm going to go ahead and switch my screens here so you can see me at a bigger angle. So we know that we've got these three parts, these three-dimensional areas what we can move. So let's just break those down. We know that we can bend forwards. We know that we can bend backwards, or we can, this is what we call the sagittal plane. So we can go through flexion, we can go through extension. We know that we can move in this side plane, which we call the frontal plane. So basically we can move side to side or laterally. Okay. We also know that we can rotate. So basically we can rotate to the right and rotate to the left, the transverse plane. Now, when it comes to it, in golf, we're doing these different movements in different sequences. So it will require some certain things for me as a golfer. Now, when it comes to it, we get into a position. So this will require quite a lot of movement, especially in my posterior part or my posterior chain. So I need to be able to tilt. I need to be able to get into some type of a golf posture. If already here I'm struggling, so my golf posture is more maybe like this, my pelvis is maybe, it's difficult for me to find neutral, then already here, I'm struggling with my setup. The second piece is once we start getting into that backswing and transitioning, we know that we need some new planes here going. So we talk about rotation. We need to be able to rotate. And already here, if I have some limited internal rotation in my back hip or my trail hip, then I know that even here, I might start compensating. So I might start popping my knee out, or I might start kind of using my lower back even more. We don't want that because these parts aren't really meant to create so much motion. They're more kind of stable zones, which I'm going to go into a little bit later. So we need rotation, key piece, okay? So if I do have enough rotation in my hip, it's going to give me enough to be able to load. So I'm loading this system, loading in rotation. And what else do I need? Well, we've got our forward, we've got our rotation. We also need to be able to side bend, okay? We need to be able to side bend. If we don't side bend, then basically I'm never going to be able to get to see the ball. So I need to be able to side bend to stay in contact with the ball. But if I don't have any side bending, then that's going to be quite tricky. Or if my inside of my leg won't allow me to kind of create that, if I'm really stiff, then I'm going to start compensating as well. Finally, there's even what we call extension. So we're not playing golf back here. So this is extension. We don't have full extension, but you go from flexion to extension. So you're actually extending in the backswing. If someone has really poor posture, it is quite tricky for them to get up here, okay? So all of these parts, forward bending, backward bending, side bending, and rotation are important parts to the golf swing. Now, some parts will move a little bit more. Some parts will require that, you guys are experts at finding ways to kind of, work around it. But if we just have the foundational kind of perspective of we want players to move better, be more stable, and a little bit stronger, and that's going to help pretty much any type of golf swing, okay? Now, in these cases, what I just mentioned is there are some kind of common issues that people have because we live a lifestyle where we're sitting a lot, okay? And we're kind of living in this kind of tight confinement where we're not moving maybe the way we're supposed to move. We're sitting in an office, or we might not be exercising as much as we want. We're that weekend warrior golfer. So what might happen here is already in my golf posture, I might be struggling because I can't find a neutral pelvis, or I might be struggling because when I get to the top of my backswing, my upper body or my thoracic spine already here is kind of limited. So it's hard for me to get up to the top. If we just talk about increasing swing speed, we talked about swing length. So the better I can create swing length, the more speed I can generate. Now, if I'm tight here, if you just look at my club head, I can get from here to here just by opening up this part. So if I can create more movement here, I can theoretically increase my swing length and also increase my club speed, basically. So just by giving someone a bit more motion, we can create a foundation for improvement. Now, if a player, for instance, we talked about rotation, has poor or limited, we see this all the time, especially those that have back problems, like low back pain. I'm not going to say every time, but I'm going to say maybe 9 times out of 10, we can see that there is a direct correlation that players with low back pain, most of the time, they're limited in either their hips or their thoracic spine. And their low back, which is kind of stuck in between these two areas, it's not really doing what it's supposed to do. So basically, either I'm tight or limited here, or I'm tight or limited in my hips. Now, when we talk about this 3D golf swing, all these parts are really key components. So we need to understand that the better we can move in these 3 areas, it will help us. Now, you can also kind of break it down into, if we look at it like this. So we've got like different zones in the body. So we've got green zones and yellow zones. So the green zones, they represent kind of our mobile areas. They're built to be mobile. They're built to be able to move. And these could be, for instance, our hip. So our hip is theoretically should be very mobile. I should be able to move it in all different planes. There's a lot of muscle structure here that I can create and I can use in order for me to jump and run and push off and create power. Now, the problem is, though, there's alternating patterns. There's mobile and there's stable zones. Now, when the mobile zones, they go ahead and say, hey, you don't need me. You're sitting down too much or whatever. And now you're wanting me to move, basically wanting me to play golf. And theoretically, we should have around 45 degrees, maybe more, maybe less, of internal rotation. Now, I might be in a body where, I'm only allowing me to give me 20. After 20 degrees, I have nothing more to give. But I still want to play golf, so I want more. So what's going to happen is those additional, 15 to 20 degrees, I need to take them out somewhere because no one wants to hit the golf ball like this. So what's going to happen is that I'm going to start torquing more in my lower back, or I might start using my knee to create that. So my knee starts popping out, and doing that several times, it's not going to be something that's very good because the stable zone isn't really built for a lot of movement. It's more built to be stable. So what we try to do from a mobility perspective is provide resources for the player so that we provide drills around the feet, around the hips, around the thoracic spine to make sure that these parts of the body are working. And if I have to choose for you guys, I would say that the hips is going to give you the most bang for your buck. Then the thoracic spine. Now the feet, I've been doing this for the past 15 years. I would say the more I know, the more I realize how little I know. But I know that the foot's really, really important. But sometimes it's quite technical and quite detailed. So I would say that the hips is a great way to start if we want to talk about body parts, because there's so much things going on. Both your backside, your inside, your out, just so many parts here that we can just tweak and help players improve a little bit more. Now, again, if you have any questions or so, feel free to use it or kind of mention those in that sense. Now, when we talk about some screening and assessments, there is quite an important piece here. And what we want to do when we help players is, now that we have an understanding that there's 2 major parts to this, the fact that we know that the player needs to be able to move in these different planes, okay, then it makes a little bit more sense than kind of maybe just isolating a specific body part. So think moving parts, think joints. Now, we know that these planes are important. I'll repeat them again. We've got our sagittal plane, our frontal plane, and our transverse plane, okay? Now, once we know this, we want to also understand that there's different segments. So the hips, the thoracic spine, the feet, these are key components. So when we do testing, when we test, for instance, mobility, we want to get a good understanding that we're assessing these major parts. So what's going on? Is the player able to rotate enough? Or are they able to side bend? Or are they able to move their hips well enough so we can create better foundation for the golf swing? Now, when it comes to Kinexit, and a little bit about us for those that are interested, well, then what we tried to do was we tried to simplify and create a user-friendly experience so that we're assessing a player's ability to move in these different planes of motion, and then also look at what's going on in these major parts, the foot, the hip, the thoracic spine. So we've got a number of different assessments, and I was thinking we could break down maybe one or two of our assessments today to kind of give you a little bit of a sense. So we're working practically, so I'm not just kind of throwing out things here and there, but just to kind of stay focused on what we could possibly do. So we're going to focus on two areas around this. We call it our express assessment and our mobility screening. And they're built, one is the express, and it's built to be as simple and easy as possible. We're talking things that you can do on the hitting bay. You never have to leave the hitting bay, and something that you can do under 3 minutes. So it's great if you've got any golfer, high handicap, mid-range, someone who's quite, stiff. They might not be completely open to everything. It's just one of those things which is great to kind of break the ice. We're not going to figure everything out in 3 minutes, but it's going to give us a great sense for what the player needs to do. We also got our mobility screen, which exactly what I mentioned these past few minutes, what's going on in these different planes, and gives us a much, much better understanding, basically. So if we kind of break that down, we want to understand the different parts, the different planes, and we want to understand what's going on when it comes to the player's feet, their hips, and their thoracic spine. So when we look at it and go deeper, then what's going to happen is Kinexit's going to provide feedback and provide data so that the player knows, okay, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses. What can I do to improve? And then once we get a gathering of this, we'll then provide kind of the drills and the exercise. And we're going to kind of dive into the drills as well. But the key thing here is that if you have a player with limited mobility in their hips, then we know that what kind of golf fitness specific drills can I do in order to help me kind of improve those different areas. So let's kind of break down our express assessment. And there's like 100 ways to do this, but if you're ever interested to go ahead, and if you're not currently using Kinexit, I would definitely encourage you to go into our website, go to Coach, and then go to Try Now. You can get a 30-day trial. You get some months there that you can share with players. It's a great way to kind of get you set up and get you a sense how it works. So feel free to go and check it out and see what you think. There, you will go ahead. You can use our website, and then you're going to have access to then our coach dashboard that you can use where you can share memberships and track players and so forth. Now, our express assessment is really, really cool. It's 5 tests, takes about 3 minutes to do, and you don't need to leave the hitting bay. You can do everything on site, and you can kind of go from there. When it comes to it, and when we look at the express assessment itself, I mentioned before that there are some key components to the golf swing. And when we look at this particular test, we're kind of asking the question, can you get into your golf posture, and can you tilt your pelvis? So are you able to tilt your pelvis? So imagine that you've got your belt buckle, and we're now asking the player if they could tilt their pelvis forwards and backwards. Now, this is a good test in that sense of you probably work with golfers and you're noticing that they're either you're kind of pre-positioned like this, or they're too much like this. They're arcing too much. We don't want too much of this because it's really bad for your back. It's not very healthy. And too much of this is really hard to rotate. Like you can't pretty much get around it. So what we want to do is we want to tell our player, hey, can you find neutral? Some players just can't find neutral. So in this case, we're asking them how well can they tilt their pelvis? And if they can, it's green. If they can't, it's red. It basically looks like this. Or if they're kind of shaking a lot, well, then we know that there are some limitations. Let's kind of give them a yellow. So tilting of the pelvis is a key component. It's also something that anyone can do. Anyone can stand up. I could have a group of 5 people, and I could kind of test this and scan them off, very quickly. Again, it's not going to tell me everything about the golf swing, but it's kind of a little bit of an indicator where you're kind of going. Another piece that is a good test to kind of look into is the ability for the player to separate their lower body from their upper body. So basically, getting into their golf posture again, we're looking here at how well they can separate their lower body. So their lower body's moving, their upper body's still. So can they rotate without moving their upper body? So this gives us a pretty good understanding of if they can create separation. And this is much to do with the sequencing in the golf swing. We want that hip to move a little bit faster than we've got our upper body. But in some cases, talk about the X factor in the swing. But in many golfers in case, it looks very much everything's moving at the same time, okay? We're losing some great power here. Sometimes it's a technical thing. They just don't know how to sequence it. Some, they just can't do it. They just don't know how to separate their body. And this needs, some practice and some drills to work on. So sequencing and separation is a great test to kind of look into. And if they can do it, well, then we know that it's kind of, this is great. Then we can move on. If they can't, it kind of looks like either they're popping their hip too much or their knees are moving, but their hips aren't really rotating. Well, then we know we've got some area. Or in the case where everything's moving at the same time, we know that that's a red. And then we can kind of assess that and get a sense of, okay, we've got some issues here with this kind of the separation. We do the same thing, and we look at how well can the player separate their upper body from their lower body. So same test, great way to also just look at upper body separation. So lower body still, upper body moving and rotating. We can look at quality, look at how well motion-wise. We can also just look at, is there any difference between the right and the left side? In most cases, we see golfers all the time. They do this. Everything's moving at the same time. Or their arms are looking much like this. So their arms are rotating and moving, but their kind of upper body isn't really doing anything. Another red that you can kind of look at and kind of assess what's going on here. Okay, how can I handle my technical kind of advice based on what I'm seeing? Finally, you can look at 2 other pieces. One is just an overall toe touching test, feet together, our legs straight, and then you go down as far as you possibly can. If they can touch their toes, it's a green. If it's a red, they basically can't do it. This is just more of that overall kind of golf posture. We talked about the beginning of this position is it does require a lot from my kind of posterior chain here. And if I'm really stiff, my hamstrings are tight, my positioning on my pelvis, all this, if this is hard, even before setup, there are some struggling points that a golfer can really improve. And then finally, it's just a quick balance test, just to get a sense of what's going on. So just standing still, getting into like a 90-degree angle, 10 seconds, and then you switch legs and do the same on the opposite side. If you can do both sides, it's a green. If you can't do either or, that's a red. It's not going to give us everything we know about the golf swing, but it's going to give us a great starting point of what the player can do, what they need to work on, it can give us some feedback on just, the more red they have, the more areas we can improve. The lower, in this case, their handicap. So we've got a system where we provide a goal fitness handicap for the player. So the more red they have, the higher the handicap, the lower the handicap. So if you have everything green, then we provide a scratch result. So quick test, quick result, great overview. Everyone understands kind of the goal fitness handicap piece. And it gives me a sense, wow, I'm a decent golfer, but my goal fitness handicap really needs to improve. Now, those you can say are great just starting points. So tilting, separation, and just looking at overall kind of an overview of how we can help the player. Now, in some cases, we want to go a bit deeper. We want to get the question I just mentioned before, well, what about these different planes? What about the end range to, when I get to the top of the backswing? These things are important as well. And sometimes we have golfers that require a little bit more. Now, I want to give some different samples from our mobility screen, which is also great, a little bit deeper. We're looking at 7 tests here. We're looking at about 12 minutes to complete. And here we're using a wall and a measuring tape to kind of get a good sense of how far a person can reach. So either or, just to give you a little bit of a sense of kind of our coach dashboard, when you're working with players, our coach dashboards are really cool because you can share memberships, you can get them set up, you can provide credit. So for us, a credit is time. So if you want to provide a month or 2 months or 12 months or a 7-day trial, all these things you can do, and you can kind of track your students from your dashboard directly, which is pretty cool. Now, the mobility screen, again, if we kind of break that down, our first test is that foot and ankle piece. We know that it is a key piece. It's 1 out of the 7 tests, so it doesn't require all our attention, but at least it gets a bit of a checkpoint. I mentioned to you that if you're interested, in this test, we're using a measuring tape. Now, for all our US kind of attendees, so we do have both the kind of the metric kind of option, and you also use the US kind of option as well. But in this case, I'm just going to give you the overview, but every test here requires a measuring tape. And what we want to do is we want to try to do different positions, but we want to try to get away from the wall as far as we can. So the further a player can reach from the wall, the better the range of motion. The shorter, well, the more room for improvement. Now, in this particular foot test, we're going to imagine that my chair here is my wall, just to give you that example. So my chair is my wall. So what we're doing is we're going to try to move away from the wall as far as we can. We're going to drive that knee so it touches the wall, and we're measuring the distance between the toe and the wall, basically. Now, in this case, dorsiflexion is quite important. So dorsiflexion is basically when I drive my knees forwards, what's going to happen is I'm going to load my calves, for instance. And the higher I want to jump, well, the better it is for me to bend over or kind of get into this position. Well, in some cases, some golfers are very restricted in their feet. So what we're looking at in this particular test is how well the player can create this motion, basically, okay? So we're going to do this on both the right and the left foot. And for instance, if the player can't really reach that far, or they can't move away from the wall far enough, then we know that they've got some limitations. We know that there's some room for improvement here. I'm going to chuck those scores into Kinexit, and then we're going to go over then to the second test, which is going to help me kind of get a better view of some different aspects. Now, this test here, we're looking at the player's ability to bend forwards, but with an internally rotated position. So let me explain. Now, I want you guys to imagine now that we've got a golfer. The golfer is getting to the top of the backswing, and we're going to kind of stop there. We're going to take an image or like a still image here. So what is happening basically, both from a biomechanical perspective, is that I am at my top, I'm at my end range. This is where I'm going to transition. Now, I'm going to be in an internally rotated position in my trail hip, okay? So this is an internal rotation. So what we want to know is, I'm asking the question, how well can the player internally rotate their hip at the same time they're bending forwards? Because we know that I need to be able to bend forwards in order to get into my golf posture. So how well can I bend forwards? And how well can I internally rotate that trail hip? So bend forwards, and how we kind of solve that is we're pre-positioning that foot in an inside angle. Or if we look at that image, my foot is pointing inwards. Well, why that's important is we kind of know how well the player can do this. So what's going to happen is the toe is going to point inwards. If you're my wall, then I'm going to try to drive down and touch and come back. And my goal is to move away from the wall as far as I possibly can. There's going to get to a point where the golfer can't do this anymore. He's going to start compensating. He's going to start lifting his heel, or he might starting to fall over. We don't want that. So we want to kind of reach that threshold or that sweet spot. Once I got my sweet spot on my right side, and do the same thing on the left side, and that gives us a pretty good understanding of how well can I get into my internally position, or how well can I internally rotate? How can I load this? At the same time, how well can I bend forwards? We're putting those two planes together to get a good understanding. We're going to do the same thing, but we are going to externally rotate this time, because when we get to the top of the backswing, on the trail hip, we know that we're internally rotating, but in the lead hip, we know that we're externally rotating. Same thing through transition. So I'm going to make contact, and when I get through, what's going to happen is going to be the opposite. I'm now going to be internally rotating my lead, and I'm going to be externally rotating my trail hip, okay? So we need to get an understanding of both sides, both internal and external, and the opposite. So how we test that is that instead, we're going to get the player to point their toe outwards, put their foot close. They're going to drive their hands down and come back. And we're going to try to do this as far away from the wall as possible. We're going to grab that distance between the toe and the wall, chuck it in, and it's going to give us a good understanding here. So what we're looking for in this test is external plus the ability for the player to bend forwards, okay? Now, if you guessed it, then we're also going to be looking at backward bend. So here, if we break down the swing, we know that we've got a top of the backswing. We are, in many cases, bending backwards. So we need to be able to create extension and extension. So we're putting 1 + 1 is equal to. So the 1 is the internal. The other 1 is the extension. And we put those together to create this test. So how well can I bend backwards with an internally rotated position? So basically, if this is my wall, I'm going to be bending backwards as far as I can, coming back, and I'm going to try to move away from the wall as far as I can. This gives us a good sense of players that might find it very tricky to extend because they're too much in this position. So we want to help them by providing more movement in that part of the body. And then, of course, we're going to do this externally as well. So we're going to look at how well the player can extend with an externally rotated position too. And then finally, on our last two tests in this particular one, is we've looked at forward bending, we've looked at backward bending, we've looked at rotation, and now we're also going to look at side bending, because I did mention that there's a lot of side bending as well. So we need to be able to side bend to get into what we want in this position, in this kind of golf part of the golf swing. So the side bending is key, and we test that by having the player side bend to the right without spinning. And we do this on both the right and the left side. And then we're going to go over to then the second, or the last part of this, which is the left side bend, which basically means that they're going to side bend to the left. And in these particular tests, we're looking at how far away from the wall can the player move without rotating or compensating. So these tests are great from a kind of biomechanical perspective in these different planes. So we're looking at forward bends, we're looking at backward bend, we're looking at those side bending pieces, and we're looking at rotation. So if we have a player that has issues, for instance, in bending backwards, then we know that that's a piece that we can improve. You can do these things yourself, and then you can provide some great drills. Or what you can do is you can use these tests, get some great feedback on the player, and see kind of what areas they can improve and get better. But also, one of the cool things is that you can do it in a very time-efficient way. So from sharing a membership to providing feedback, we're looking at a track between anywhere like 5 to 15 minutes, depending on the screening you choose. So if you have a 45-minute lesson, or in any case, maybe a 25-minute lesson, makes so much sense in able to do something like this if you want to incorporate a component like a goal fitness component, basically. If we look at some of the drills and so forth from a mobility perspective, well, there is thousands and thousands of different drills and exercises that you could do. I could spend days, years I could spend giving you different versions of drills and exercises. But I would say some of the best ones is understanding the foundational or the foundation to goal fitness is building a solid ground with mobility and stability, for instance, is understanding this kind of pyramid, or you could say this performance kind of overview of how we can get players to move a little bit better. So see if I can find that kind of slide. I think that should be coming up right here. So if we have a mobility and stability foundation, then that's where I would say we spend most of our time. That's where we can help players, and you can do a lot of this. And I would say this is a lot of the things that we prioritize in Kinexit, in making sure players are moving better. Because if we can restore function and mobility, then I think we can provide great foundational aspects to putting on more power, or if it's speed or whatever that is. We just see so many players today that are limited and they struggle with maybe some pain and some injuries, and we can definitely do a lot of that to help them improve. So instead of maybe focusing on, do this one exercise, figure out what can I do for my foot, what can I do for my player's hip, and their thoracic spine. What can I do for these different planes? What kind of drills can I provide for my player that will help them restore their ability to move in these different planes, in the forward plane and the backward and side bending and rotation? And that's going to give you a great understanding. From a kind of local to global perspective, maybe starting on drills where you're on a kneeling position. If they find it hard to do that, maybe standing. But a point in maybe a local exercise, for instance, if I would improve my hip extension, locking in my hip and putting my knee on something is going to really, really locally provide me with more tension in my hip, rather than maybe if I'm standing up, because I could be compensating in other ways. So thinking around those terms is a key piece. And I would say, kind of going back to this these kind of drills here, there's multiple ways of looking at it. But these are kind of some drills that we have in Kinexit. We've got a little over 1,000 drills, but some of these are really, really good just from like creating a better version of a golfer. So when we look at, let's see if I can kind of pop that up here. If it wants. Hopefully, here we go. So if we look at these, so just looking at maybe a hip extension, if we got players that have a hard time getting into position or separating their upper and lower body, or finding it hard to kind of tilt their pelvis, or just one of these drills where they've got their foot on the wall and they're rotating, there is a ton of this. And I would definitely recommend going into Kinexit and kind of navigating around, getting some inspiration. There's a lot of great things there. I can definitely recommend it. If we look at kind of break down kind of the progression between mobility and onward, I would say that one area that we talk about a lot is going from pain to going to kind of health plus. And, let's be honest, a lot of golfers have issues today. So if you have a player that has that low back pain issue, make sure that they're checking out if their hips are doing what it's supposed to. If it's not, do something about it. It's not kind of going to go away of itself. We need to kind of attack it front end and kind of do something. Or if they want to go and see someone, or make sure that they're getting it taken care of, so we can kind of get them playing even better golf. Kinexit wise, we've got a little over 1,000 drills, as I mentioned. Lots of great things that a player can use and work with. And we try to match, whatever limitations they have, and provide these personal drills and exercises so they can improve. And working a lot with this kind of pyramid kind of strategy, that if they don't have the foundation, we start with that and we kind of build on top of it. A couple of overviews here. We've got lots of great things like, choosing flexibility workouts, different types of time. So if they only have 15 minutes, that's fine. Everything's animated. You can add your own coach videos as well. So there's a lot of kind of flexibility and sides to that. We only have a few more minutes left, but I just wanted to share a little bit around that business piece that I mentioned. There's a lot of you today that are, amazing at what you do, and you're in all the different ways that everyone works with. We know that packaging a component like this really makes a lot of sense. So if you have an initial lesson, where we would come in is that we would provide that tool to be able to screen your player, give them those programs that they can do over a lesson package, and then you would do your drills, and then we can then provide that retesting to see if they've improved. It's a great way to kind of add value to your programs. So instead of going with that, buy 4, get the 5th for free, we're providing more value, more tools, more pieces to this package. So like one of our clients, they start off with the screening lesson. You're looking at, a biomechanical analysis. They're looking at their Kinexit screening. The player will be getting 3 lessons. They're getting 2 months of Kinexit. So this is a great way to just add more to what you're currently doing. So some of the benefits, if we just look at it, is it's a real door opener to technical development. We want to make sure that every coach that we're working with, that they are enhancing and they're getting a lot out of it. It's attractive, it's profitable in many cases. And we know that if we can add more value to our packages, we can increase our pricing. If we can increase our pricing, we can increase our revenue as well. I would say some of the tips and ideas going forward is kind of make an active choice. You are who you are, and I think what are the things that you want to stand for? And moving towards this holistic approach does make so much sense for so many. They just haven't found kind of the right tool or the right way of doing it. So if there's any interest in learning more about Kinexit, please reach out. We'd love to kind of have a conversation and see how we can help you. Educate yourself. It's a key piece. Make sure that you feel comfortable in talking about it. And I would say a little is much better than nothing. So even a few drills or something is something that can go a long way. Just to get a little bit of understanding of what we do, we are very much for professionals, academies, and clubs. We provide certifications, different types of memberships, depending on how many students you have and you're working with. We're very, very support first. So if anyone needs help or more resources, we're here to help. With our onboarding and education, we provide, most of it is online. We provide kind of sessions where we're spending about 2 to 3 hours, go through some biomechanics, go through, get a deep dive into our in-lesson screenings, how to give feedback, how to launch Goal Fitness into your business, and just a really good kind of on-demand. You can do it online or kind of on-site depending on your plans and so forth as well. Our knowledge center that we have is something that we provide for all our pros. It's just there, so if you need any marketing tools, social media ideas, packaging and business kind of suggestions, things for winter training, season training. So all these things we have in our resource center. It's great, and it's there so you don't have to start from scratch, and it's there to help you. We've got a wide range of different plans for pros, depending on the size of your business, etc. Anything from, those that are in a startup phase, you can contact us if you're just starting off. You're looking at our starter and our standard and our pro plans. So it's really all about kind of how many students you're working with, what kind of features you're looking for. Schedule a call with us. Once we learn more about your business, then we'll make sure that we provide the best tool for you. Hey guys, if you have any questions or so, feel free to ask them in the chat. Otherwise, I usually like to say that everything's been clear, everything's been kind of crystal, or at least I hope so. It's been an absolute pleasure to spend this hour with you. I'm so glad that so many of you could join us. And from all parts of the world, I'm seeing the US and Europe and other parts of the world, which is great. So thank you so much. If you don't have any questions or so, this will be recorded. So if you want to kind of go back and review some of it, please do. If you have any questions afterwards, you can also email us. You could email me at chris@kinexit.com if you want to learn about Kinexit, or if you have any questions, or if there's any way we can help you, please reach out. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time. Hope you have a great start of your day. If you're at the end of your day, hope you have a great evening, and enjoy the weekend soon. Otherwise, we'll stay in touch, and thanks so much for your time. Take care.